She finds herself in the Egyptian underworld, stuck in a queue of other dead bodies waiting to be judged by Osiris.
There are tales of rogues and whores, of stratagems and wars. There's a tale for every season of the year. There are tales of knights and queens, of drudgery and dreams. There's a tale for everybody here. There are stories galore, in volumes by the score, on every subject throughout history. It's all waiting in Pandora's library.
Welcome back to Pandora's Library, a new monthly podcast about books that feature the mysterious, fantastical, dark, and creepy elements of life. If you're listening on the audio podcast, you might like to know that it's also available as a visual podcast. My name is Karen Hamilton-Vile. I'm a paranormal murder mystery author of a series of books about Ada Baker, a medium who solves crimes with the aid of the ghost she lives with. I'm a lover of books, and I grew up in a house full of thousands of books, but I always gravitated towards the supernatural. This month, I'm interviewing my friend Fanny Garstang. Fanny is a multi-genre indie author whose creative brain meanders through the lands of dragons, phantoms, and long-forgotten gods. She dwells in Gloucestershire with her husband, daughter, and pets, and has self-published 11 novels. She's been writing novels since her teens and has written in multiple genres, including historical fantasy, romance, and the supernatural. She also runs her own indie author book fair. Fanny, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be one of the first ones.
So I thought I'd start by asking if you could give us a summary about some of your novels that fit in with the genres of this podcast.
Yeah, 2 fantastical historicals, one set with the Mayans and one set with the Egyptian gods. I also have a supernatural one, supernatural historical, based around vampires, but I've actually made it more realistic and left you to decide whether he's actually a vampire or not, the reader, a vampire or not. Because I based it on porphyria, which is also known as the vampire disease, and which was prevalent amongst Eastern European nobility, and is likely what Bram Stoker used as his base for Dracula. I've also got my 5-book fantasy series with both European and Chinese dragons in it.
Fantastic. So, the first book of yours that I read was, am I saying this right, Kukulkan's Messenger?
Kukulkan's, yes. Even I can't pronounce it. So that's this one here. So I'm holding up my book with a lovely cover of a Mayan knelt before the god with a snake headdress. Yes, so that was my first ever book that I wrote while I was on family holiday in Mexico, in Chichen Itza itself. I have been there, so every description I've written in there is based on my own experience of being on site. It was inspired by a little info box in the Lonely Planet's Yucatan, talking about how virgins were sacrificed into the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza. So my thought suddenly went, what if somebody survived? What if they didn't drown? And that's where it came from. Kukulkan, just so if anyone's not aware of the Mayan gods, is actually in Aztec mythology he's known as Quetzalcoatl, so the feathered serpent.
So I've been to Mexico, but can you describe what a cenote is to somebody that might not have been there?
Yes, so a cenote is basically where in Mexico, in the Yucatan, a lot of the water is actually under the rocks, down in the rocks, and so they carve out the rivers underneath. It carves out caverns, and then as the roof of those caverns get weaker and weaker, it then collapses in and creates what we also know as a sinkhole, and so you can see all the water down at the bottom of them, sort of like a big pond at the bottom.
And those sites are amazing, aren't they? I remember when I went, I got to climb up one of the pyramids there. Yeah. I don't know if you're allowed to do that anymore.
No, you're not. It's been a good few years. I didn't even know that myself. You occasionally see footage of some cheeky tourists trying to climb up them and being chased by security guards. But, so I feel very privileged that I could actually climb it, and, so I could describe the interior of that temple on the top, so...
So you've written quite a bit about gods, haven't you? You've written about Egyptian gods, and
yes.
And I love the way you write about the gods and how they interact with humans. So which gods that you've written about would you most like to be real?
So I had to think about this one. I think I probably although I love my Egyptian gods, I've kind of written them as all quite a bit snobbish, so I probably wouldn't really want to meet many of those. But I had fun writing Chak, who's the Mayan rain god. He's often portrayed with a big hook nose, and so I wrote him as a bit more of a sort of bit more like a punch character, so a bit of a joker, a jester. So he was quite a fun character to write. So I think I'd probably, if he was like that in real life, I think I'd happily meet Chak and have a hot chocolate with him.
I mean, I really loved the way you wrote the gods. That was my favourite thing in that book, that they felt very sort of real, and the way they interacted with the humans. They were still gods and superior, but it sort of brought them down to a level and made them feel sort of alive.
I think having grown up as a teenager, I was obsessed with myths and legends, so that probably helps because any myth and legend has so much about the gods and humans interacting with each other. It's probably been heavily influenced by all that reading of myths and legends. So not just the Greek ones, the Viking ones, even Indian ones. I had a whole book on the Indian mythologies and myths and legends.
So everything. Yeah, my grandfather had a whole like massive set, like I don't know, it's from about the 1910s or something, about all the different mythologies, and I used to love reading them, especially
I've got
the Greek and Roman ones.
I've got a collection of books. They're downstairs. I should have brought them up. But they're written in sort of like article format, so they're 2 columns each, but beautiful illustrations inside, and they're all on different themes. The Indian one was the first one I ever had. I don't know how I got it, but that was given that, but probably at an inappropriate age, so it took me a long time to get into it. But I used to just look at the pictures, and then once I'd read that one, I wanted to get other ones, so I've got the Native American one, I think I've got the South American one, and I've got the Egyptian one as well. So
your Egyptian book, what's it called again?
It is, I will show you, I've got a picture, I'm holding up the hard copy version, which I was attempting to, called I'm Not Dead Yet, Cleo's Journey Through the Egyptian Underworld, with a gorgeous picture of my dark-skinned character, Cleo.
I love that cover. It looks very sort of 1950s-ish, I suppose.
I quite often give the artists an idea of what I'm looking for, and then I just leave them to it, and then they show me what they've been thinking of, and to be honest, most of the time I go yes, because I just don't have the imagination. So
I really like it. I think her gaze really draws you in.
Yeah, so it's following the journey through the Book of Gates, which is the Ra going through the Egyptian underworld to be reborn again as the sun. And the mythology is that he has to defeat Apep, the demon of chaos. So it's probably a bit darker because of the fact that it is following the Egyptian underworld. There is quite a few dark scenes where it's just, walking through flame-lit corridors and stuff like that on the route.
So is Cleo the Cleopatra, or is that just a...
No, so she's just named after Cleopatra. So she's actually someone of our time, again, a bit like the Mayan one. So she's on an archaeological site and falls through what's called a false door in a tomb, which is what the cars used to cross between the spiritual world and our world, because in theory the tombs were meant to be reopened and offerings given every year. Whether that actually happened or not is another thing. So the false door was like a doorway for the spirit world to come back and forth, and then she finds herself in the Egyptian underworld, stuck in a queue of other dead bodies waiting to be judged by Osiris.
My grandfather was an amateur Egyptologist. He was always going up to the British Museum and places like that. He used to give talks about it, so it's something that fascinates me personally as well.
Yeah, no, I think I went to Egypt as a teenager, but I think I've always loved history. My mum's always been a huge history person, so we're always being dragged around historical sites. So even now I'm dragging my daughter around the historical sites, whether she likes it or not. So Egypt, was always one of those big ones that was always a tick list one. And so it's always stuck with me, Egypt. So.
Oh, I'd love to go there. My grandfather, I found in his books, he'd kept... an article about, I think her name's Dorothy Eady, the lady who believed she'd been, I think, an Egyptian priestess or something like that. And I wondered if he'd met her at one point, and she thought she'd been reborn in this life, but once upon a time, she'd been an Egyptian. So I thought that was quite interesting.
I didn't know her name. It sounds familiar. I probably have heard of something like that. You often occasionally hear of somebody.
Famous. Yeah. So, moving on, because you've got so many books, tell us about your Valley of Dragons series. So, you've now published 5 books in that series?
At the moment, it is only 5. The 5th one's only just come out, and then there's 2 prequels. So I'll just show you some of those. Ta-da! So I'm holding up the first 3 in the series. Guardians of the Valley is the first one, The Lost Gods second, and then Daughters of Scythe, which is my favourite, is the third one. And that's once again inspired by mythology and history and everything like that. So the Amazon warriors, but it's also very much a mixture. A lot of fantasy seems to be set around the medieval period and medieval weaponry and armour and castles. But I went down the route, once again, influenced by numerous different cultures. So there's a lot of there's Far Eastern influences in there, the Mongolians, the Japanese, the Indian subcontinent and Persia. Then there's a bit of Greek mythology sort of sitting around in there. And then one of probably would deserve a trigger warning, but they do self-mutilation, which is inspired by the Mayans. So they offer the gods by slitting their hand and offering their blood, just like the Mayans used to do. Not quite a thorn through the tongue, but
you had something similar to that in the I can't even say the word again. How do you say it? Ku Klux
Klan's messenger, yeah. Yeah, so the Mayans and the priests and the nobility were expected to do a lot of self-mutilation and offer their own blood up to the gods, as well as the big human sacrifices. So there would be, they were better known for putting strings of thorns, running strings of thorns through their tongues, and nail implements, which will probably make every man cross their legs if they're listening to this.
Were you inspired by any other authors who write about dragons, like Anne McCaffrey, is it, or Game of Thrones or anything like that?
I have confessed I've started reading one of them, but actually it was Dragonheart, the movie. My original first version was inspired a bit more by the costumes and what I think I've learned now is called portal fantasy. So the original version was that the main character was wandering down the road in our world in a huge oilskin coat, a bit like sort of the big carriage coats that the Victorians and Georgians used to wear, and then sort of picks up a woman, befriends her and takes her off to the land. So seeing it from our view compared to his known world. But I mean, I shook it up when I rewrote it while stuck in a traffic jam in Bridgewater with somebody set within that world, so has a better understanding of it, but still she's new to his side of the culture of that world then.
So what's the main protagonist called within the book? I've forgotten. I've tried to look for my book this morning, but I couldn't find it.
No, that's fine. He's called Kital. So he's actually, that's another thing that makes my book slightly different, is that he's actually 50 years old. I had one reviewer liking the fact that it was an older person who knew himself, who knew life, and rather than what a lot of fantasy these days has, younger protagonists who are all discovering themselves or are discovering they are the one and has to be taught how to get on with life. So.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Do I remember right? You said something about he was inspired by Sean Bean or something? Or have I made that up in my head?
No, there's probably a bit of Sean Bean in there as well somewhere. I think he's one of my actors. If I could have him playing if I could have an actor playing the role, that would be him.
So, which famous author do you feel your writing most closely resembles, or if not one, which fusion of authors?
So I had to think about this one. So I used to say I would be heavily influenced by the likes of sort of like Rosemary Sutcliffe, Jean Plaidy, so all the historical writers, but actually I think I am myself now. So yes, there's still probably influences of some of it, but it's very much my own style. I read so many different authors, indie and big publishers houses, that there's a right mix of them in there. So I've got a romance coming up that's been influenced by a book another romance that I read with lots of text messaging in it, and it really works with it. But yeah, I just pick and choose from different authors.
Because you're quite influenced by history, aren't you? Did you do an archaeology degree or something? I think you said.
Yeah, I've got an archaeology degree. So I have actually in my back catalogue got a book that I wrote based on an archaeological site with a ghost coming up and taking over somebody possessing one of my characters. Sadly, the original has got lost in the various moves, so I have not the original copy, but I remember the original idea, and the plan is to rewrite that at some point. I've got the basis of it with a Roman gladiator and his sweetheart who works in a Roman inn.
So, how do you write your novels? Do you need any special equipment to be a writer, do you think, for anybody that's just starting out on their writing journey?
I think a lot of people think they need a lot of stuff. They need all these fancy sites like Scrivener. Is it Scrivener?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Old school, I write by pen and paper. So I have numerous notebooks scattered around the house full of words. I write as kind of a way of relaxing. I have typed up whole books on a computer. I don't know whether they've come out any better or any worse. I quite like sort of being able to just pick up a pen and a piece of paper, scribble a few words down, and then crack on with whatever else I'm doing. Or even just grabbing a scrap of paper and writing a whole scene, which I can then transfer sellotape or Pritt stick into in at the right point.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, certainly when I started in my teens, I just had a notebook and pen. And I remember my dad got his first ever PC, and it was like, oh, wow. I remember being caught at 2 a.m. in the morning by my mum sort of writing because I was in the zone of writing. So I mostly write on the computer nowadays, but it's still nice to write a bit by hand sometimes. So you said before you write it in the book and then you type it all up. It sounds quite labour intensive, but you find it easier to write by hand. And
So many people I get the impression that a lot of people are worried about how many words they've written in a day, or whether it, 1, 2, or they have to write 1,000 words and then they're watching that word count rather than enjoying the whole point of writing is that you're writing a story, and rather than concentrating on that word count. So writing in a book, I couldn't tell you how many words I've written by the end of it. So it's actually more enjoyable that I've written that whole book, not worried about chapters, not worried about word count. I've written that whole book, and then when I'm typing it up, that's where the excitement of seeing how many words comes out of me, and just knowing that, impressed by myself on how many words I've written. So Lulu Collections Messenger in its latest format is I think it's about 70,000 words. So think about that as a teenager writing that many words. It was in my family, it's been nicknamed the Mayan opus epic for the fact of how many words it is. And then Daughters of Scythe, which is book 3, that is my longest book. That's 90,000 words. But I wouldn't have known that to start with. I was just busy writing away.
And I think that's about the right length, isn't it, for a lot of books? I mean, I think you can write more if it's a fantasy world or sci-fi world or something that people expect more.
Yeah.
A longer book. But yeah, for a lot of books, about 80,000 words is supposed to be about right, isn't it? 70, 80, 90. So I think it's really good to let people know as well that you don't need special equipment. I mean, I wrote my first novel on an old iPad with a broken keyboard, just sitting there on the sofa, tapping away. So it was nothing particularly special or expensive at the time. What inspires you? What books are currently top of your to-be-read list?
I have lots of books. I have in my bedroom, well, my husband has what he's called his shelves of shame. I have my pile of shame. I have a little bookcase behind it, which I thought would be enough when I bought it, and it clearly still wasn't enough, as I've still got about 5 stacks in front of it. So I'm inspired by everything and anything. So I've got indie authors, of supernatural, urban fantasy, romance, thrillers. I've got horror, and then from the big publishers, all the mainstream publishers, I've got a lot of historicals, a bit of romance, a bit of thrillers. My mum and I both got similar tastes, so I keep getting given books by her, so my pile grows bigger than I can read it at the moment.
And my pile's beside my bed as well. My husband sort of always complains about it because this little book pile grows up as I take a book off a shelf and that's interesting, and I put it back there and not on the bookshelf. In fact, like you say, I don't think I've got enough bookshelf space for all the books that I've got. What's your favourite book at the moment, do you think? Which one are you really looking forward to reading next?
Oh, I should be cheeky, really. I should say your book. But I'm a mood reader. So honestly, I've got a couple of books I need to try and finish. One is Alison Weir's book on Mary Tudor, the first,
too, yeah.
and the other one is a small publisher printed book called Ghost Train, which is set in the late 1800s Japan, where trains just started arriving, and a bit of the spirits and the animal spirits and the demons are offended by the train that's been built through their woods and stuff like that. So
Oh, that sounds cool.
I've got those two to finish before I even think about what to read next.
What place does inspiration strike you? So I've been sitting in a theatre before, or at a traffic lights when I saw something that inspired me. Where have you been when the muse has struck?
Well, Mayan one was Chichen Itza. The rewrite of the first in my fantasy series was stuck in a 4-hour traffic jam in Bridgewater. Other ones, it's just through a little bit of research. So Cleo's was just trying to work out the journey through the underworld, finding a tiny little snippet in a book about the Book of Gates, so that I could then start looking up that whole journey, because the Egyptians loved writing down their books, their stories. It just comes from everything and anywhere, really. A lot of it is definitely influenced by history and just wanting to play with history and fashion. So
It really can come from anywhere. I was sitting in a tea room yesterday with my husband, and opposite was a shoe repair shop that's just been renovated, and the sign above it that it was hanging from, the metalware was in the shape of a cross.
yeah.
And it just made me think of that could be the front for him being a vampire hunter, and he has this secret cross above his door. And my mind was just going off on a tangent, and my husband's going, yeah, okay.
I get some of my ideas come from dreams, I will confess.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have half a dystopian book written because of a dream I had. My dreams feel very much like movies sometimes. One of my romances, that is also from a dream, inspired by a dream, and just went off on playing with that idea. So even dreams can help.
I've written a book which I probably won't publish, but it's called The Invisible King, and I think it's what they'd call a romantasy these days.
Oh yeah.
So perhaps I should. But yeah, that came to me in a dream. It's funny where these inspirations come from.
Romantasies are the big thing at the moment, so you should get it out there.
Yeah, definitely. When I write, I sometimes feel that it's not me creating the novel, that I'm just a receiving station for the story that's flowing through me. Sometimes my fingers can't even keep up with the speed of my brain, and I know a lot of other authors feel this way. Is this something that you've ever felt?
Yes, I think it helps. Are you a planner, or do you sort of loosely plan it?
I'm a bit of a pantser, very loose plan, about a paragraph, and then I just write. And I was saying to Helen in the last podcast, I think that's the way I do some of my best writing is by spontaneously, or she put it very well, I thought, organically, you know, things just pop into your mind.
So I'm definitely a plantser / pantser, so I think that does give the characters an opportunity to speak for themselves and to lead you in the direction they want to go in. I mean, sometimes you do have to say no, but I think it definitely definitely feels more organic that way, and it's nice to let them come up with the idea of what they want to do next, because you're starting, you may have created the character, but actually they start to form themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Mrs. Entwistle, the ghostly cook in my book, and in the third novel, which I'm writing at the moment, she just went rogue the other week. She's gone off, she's doing her own thing. I don't know why, but that's what it felt like she had to do for some reason at that point.
Yeah, so Daughters of Scythe, I had a rough plan all the way through, and then about 2/3 of the way through, my characters went, nah, I don't like the ending, and it took me off in a completely different direction.
So on a similar vein, do you plan every step of your novel before you begin, or do you write spontaneously? So you say you're a bit of a plantser.
Yeah, so I quite often have an idea of what I want from the beginning, and I will start writing the beginning. Sometimes I might know the ending. Other times I have no idea what the ending will be. I write a very rough plan. So I'm starting a new one on the French Revolution. So I've literally, at the moment, I have a selection of dates that need to be included in the book are the big significant dates, and then a rough idea of what's starting at the beginning and how it's going to end. And I can tell you I have no idea what's going to happen in the middle yet.
This podcast is inspired by the classical story of Pandora, whose curiosity led to her to open a jar, releasing sickness, death, and other unspecified evils into the world. Only hope remained in the jar. What hopes do you have for your writing in the future? What's next in your plans?
So I think I've got what every writer dreams of. I would love to have one of my books turned into a film, into a TV series. Will that happen? Probably not. I'd love to be earning enough money that I can stop doing the mundane job that I have. Will that happen? Probably not. My husband says that it takes up to 10 books for an author to catch on and start making some proper money. Well, I've hit 11. Let's see what happens. Realistically, I would be happy with just earning enough from my books that I can drop one shift a week and spend the day supposedly writing and concentrating on my books, but more likely procrastinating.
Excellent. So I've only got 2 out at the moment, but I was sort of told, somebody said book 3 is the golden number, but we'll find out when that happens. We all hope for glowing reviews when we publish our books. Books to me feel like little children that you're sending out into the world. You desperately want other people to love them as much as you do. But of course, we can never please everyone. And every writer has negative reviews. I know because I spent my time looking up authors I like, reading their negative reviews. So how do you deal with them? Are there any positives to negative reviews?
I confess, maybe I don't have many negative reviews. I barely have any reviews online at the moment. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I know I've sold books in physical events, whether they've actually got round to reading them or not, who knows. I do ask at the back of each book that they post a review somewhere, anywhere, please, pretty please. Early feedback, because I did a book tour on one of mine, I took talking about head hopping and stuff like that, some things I just didn't know about. So I took those sort of constructive feedback in mind, and hopefully there is less of that in my books now. The only one negative review that I have had was actually for Clue Collections Messenger. She claimed that I was disparaging of her culture and the gods. My husband sort of boosted my confidence on that one by pointing out the fact that she claimed that she was a Spaniard and the Mayans aren't part of the Spanish culture. So
I know on my first book I had a friend who trying to be helpful and constructive, but she said, I don't think a ghost would do that. I made it my job to look up what ghosts do, and after that I did lots and lots and lots of research on ghosts, reading, watching, anything I could find about ghosts to confirm that what I thought my ghosts had done was something that they would do. So in some ways it helped me because it's increased my knowledge about ghosts and writing from it. I always had an interest, but when I started writing my book, it was something I did during lockdown, so I hadn't really pre-planned it an awful lot.
Yeah.
But I think it can be helpful, and I think some of the other reviews have told me to do a bit more describing things that happen a bit more rather than just saying something happens a bit more, and I've tried to do that in my second novel. So yeah, I think it can be helpful myself sometimes. You run your own indie author book fair.
Yes. Where
and when does it take place?
So it is this year because it has moved. It moves based on availability at my chosen venue. So it's at Lansdowne Hall in Stroud on the 28th of June, 10 till 3. So following the farmers markets hours and when it's busy. And it's free entry. Got a great range of authors all coming in, so pretty much every genre I think is catered for. So I'm hoping we'll have plenty of people, and it'll be a gloriously sunny day again, because the plan is that some of us might be spilling out onto the lawn outside as well. So the Lansdowne Hall's got a lovely little garden where people come and sit, and after buying their bits and pieces from the farmers market, they tend to go and sit down on the grass and eat them. So hopefully, as for setting up, I think you can make it as hard or as easy as you want. So I started by just seeing if there was enough interest when I did my first one, seeing if there was enough interest from authors, and then seeing what size venue I could get and how many people I could get into it, and then working that one out. The hardest bit is the advertising bit. You can do as much as you can in the local area. You need your authors to be pushing it to their readers to come along and say hello and meet their author that they follow in person. So yeah, it's luck of the draw how many people will get in, to be honest. So that is the hardest bit.
Do you need to find insurances or anything like that to set up something like that, or does it run on the insurance of the hall?
I'm lucky that my venue has the insurance already, so they cover most of it. But depends on the venue and yourself. You might need indemnity insurance to just cover any issues.
Must be really lovely meeting your readers and potential readers sort of face to face.
Yeah, so it's going to an actual physical event is where I make most of my sales. I think it helps you can portray your passion so much more. You can ask a person who's looking at your books what they like reading, and so you can guide them to a book that they might be interested in. You can have great discussions with people, and even if they don't buy your book, the fact that they're standing talking at your stall might lure other people in because they're sort of eavesdropping to hear what's being said. So
it's nothing like having somebody talking to you and buying something for more people to come up and suddenly want it, and you suddenly become very busy. I've only sold at a few sort of craft fairs and things myself. This podcast is going out on the 1st of June, hopefully, but I'm attending one that you attended last year on the Indie Author Book Fair.
Yeah.
So that's happening on the early first May bank holiday, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
How did you find selling at a book fair like that last year?
That was a good one for me, actually. I had some good success. I had one customer come along. He wandered round. He dyed up my dragon books. Then he came back with his wife, and where she went, I want that one, that one, that one, and that one. So bought all 3 of the books that I had out at the time. So that was great.
So that's probably an important thing, I suppose, isn't it, in some ways, to have a few books ready to sell, because then they can buy several, hopefully not just one, if they like the look.
The world of Instagram and Bookstagram is a fascinating world of talking about character art. The interesting thing is that a lot of people talk about whether they wait until the whole series is out to read it, or whether they will read each book as they come out. And so it's a strange different world. There's the physical world, which are just book buyers. They're not interested in all the side things. And then you've got Bookstagram raving about all the side things, the bookish merch, as they call it. And it's balancing that act of, trying to persuade people online to buy your books. And then it's a completely different scenario when you're out in the real world talking to these people. So actually, I prefer the talking to people in real life, because they're the ones that are actually properly engaged with you. No offence, followers.
I was saying that with Helen last time, that because I write about the paranormal, they buy your book and then they tell you their little paranormal story, that they've experienced something that's profoundly affected them, and they'd love to share it with someone, but normally they don't have anybody to share that with. Do you have the similar sort of thing with the books that you write?
So it's great that they do, because I think the world is so full of skeptics, aren't they? And so people are a bit shy of whether they have or not. But then, talking to someone that does believe, it probably makes it feel more real for them. I confess I don't think I've ever experienced any ghostly encounters, but I am not a non-believer. I believe that there's possibly something out there. I will happily watch ghost hunter type programs, because both my mum and my grandmother both have said that they have encountered ghosts themselves. My mum said that when she was younger and lived in a house, she used to have the sense of or see somebody sat at the bottom of the stairs. It was an old man who was almost happy that the house was full of children. That's what she said. And my grandmother, she's supposedly had 2 encounters. I can't remember what the first one was, but the second one was that she claimed that they were staying in an old inn for a short holiday somewhere, and saw an orb in the room. So I don't not believe. I'm sure there must be something out there, but my husband will be the biggest skeptic, so I have to be quiet.
And what's the best piece of advice that you can give to new writers just starting on their journey?
I think patience. If write, what everyone always says is get writing. You've just got to write it down. Don't hang on to that story. Just get it on paper, get it on the screen, and then if you don't feel put it to one side, so it clears your mind out a little bit, and then return to it. And then also don't be afraid to go, I'm not ready yet for trying to publish. Just crack on with your next story. So I'm very lucky. I consider myself lucky anyway. So I was writing a lot as a teenager into my early 20s, and then I kind of literally stopped. My grandmother calls it, I was experiencing life, as she puts it. I did return to a couple of books, sort of try rewriting them, which I had no problem with. But it's only been in the last, she's 7, so 8 years that I've kind of come back to writing, and it's great to have that back catalogue I can refer to, because they're all, within reason, they're all great stories still. Some need very much a lot of work, some just need titivating, so it's great to be, which is probably why I've managed to get 11 books out, because I'm they are a mixture of old material and new material.
Are there any more books you're planning to release soon that listeners might like to know about?
We haven't really talked about this one. When we talk about supernatural and the vampires, I have Thatcher in the Forest. I've based it on a more realistic idea. He's still long-lived, but it's based on porphyria. And one of my readers wanted to know what happened to one of his sons. And I wasn't planning a sequel, but then sort of ideas started sparking. And so it now has a lovely sequel, which will be coming out later this year. I've got the cover happening soon. I've got someone just giving it read through, because when I edit, normally the first big edit, I have lots of descriptions to add to it. I'm writing it, but this time round I had barely anything, so I just needed some fresh eyes on it. So that one is going to be more romance, and it's a dual timeline, but there's still that supernatural element with him being long-lived and sort of still hiding in a twilight world, a bit like his father. So we'll see how that goes.
And where can listeners find your books? Where are they available?
So they are all on Amazon. Most of them are also published through another site, so that any bookshop can order them. So they can be ordered as well, or they are more than welcome to message me and they can order them that way. Or I'm at various Comic-Cons and book fairs at least once in every month going forward, so you can see me in person.
You also wanted to talk particularly about dyslexic-friendly books, didn't you?
Yeah, I think it's something that needs to be highlighted, because it is a new thing that is starting to gain a little bit of traction. So I was inspired by a fellow indie author who writes all of hers as dyslexic-friendly versions as well. I'm lucky that about an hour away there is a independent bookshop called Book on the Hill in Clevedon, and they have their own small independent publishing house which also publish dyslexic friendly versions of books. And that's from big names as well, so like Ian Banks. I'm trying to think of somebody else, I can't remember anyone. I definitely know they've done Ian Banks because they've advertised that one recently. And then also Barnes and Noble in America are starting to do some of the classics as book friendly, as dyslexic friendly as well. So it's an interesting area, because it's about helping dyslexic people being able to read. I'm not dyslexic, but I'm aware that when they're looking at words, they wobble. So they're trying to read those words, and they're sort of bouncing around all over the place. So some dyslexic people find it easier if it's just a bigger font. Others prefer, there's certain fonts out there which they prefer as well. I can't remember which one, but I've gone for what's called open dyslexic font. So it's open, anybody can use it. I'll show you if you can see. Sorry, it's backwards.
Yeah.
I don't
It's just
know.
a little out of focus, but
yeah, it's out of focus.
But it's what we can see is lots, not many words on the page, quite big. What was that, sort of 5-6 words to a line?
So there's a space between the sentences, so there's more space between the sentences, so they haven't got all the words closer together, so lines are bouncing up and down. And with Open Dyslexic, what they do is they've weighted the letters on the bottom So they're slightly thicker on the bottom than on the top. So it almost it makes the eye, stabilizes the eye or something. I'm not quite sure. It's all explained on their website. So I've just done 2 of them so far.
Is that a special font that you have to download to use?
Yeah,
or?
so it's free to download. He's worked it out, and he's worked it all out and how to do it, and it's free to download, or you can donate. I donated because in fact I was going to use it, so you can donate a little bit of money towards it. So as I said, other people might use a different font completely. This one's a dyslexic friendly one. Also supposedly might be good for people with ADHD as well. I've got no proof on that one, but I'm sort of tinkering with that at the moment. I've had no sales, but I've had lots of positive feedback from when people have looked at them when I've been at events so far. So I think it's something that will gain traction at some point.
It's great to make your books accessible, isn't it? I would really love to make a large print book for older people, because my mum is in her mid-80s now, and she can't read my book. She has to try and look through a magnifying glass with her glasses on, and she still reads it like a word at a time.
Oh no!
Which obviously isn't very accessible. So it's definitely something I'd like to look at in the future. But yeah, dyslexic friendly as well sounds great. It's just finding the time, isn't it? As an indie author. And the money sometimes as well to pay for the things. Fantastic. Okay, so remind us again when the Indie Author Book Fair is, just so everybody can put it in their diaries.
28th of June in Stroud in Gloucestershire.
Fantastic. I hope it goes really well and you have a lovely time and lots of people turn up.
I'm hoping so too. I'm hoping for a glorious day so we can spill out onto the lawn.
Thank you very much for being interviewed, and hopefully I will see everybody next time on Pandora's podcast.
There are stories galore in volumes by the score on every subject throughout history. It's all waiting in Pandora's library.